Julia Roberts stands as one of the most recognizable figures in modern cinema, a performer whose presence reshaped how audiences understand charisma, romance, and emotional authenticity on screen. Her rise was never just about popularity. It became a cultural shift that transformed her into a symbol of warmth, resilience, and aspirational beauty. From the moment she broke through in Hollywood, she was no longer treated simply as an actress, but as an enduring image the public expected to remain constant. That expectation created a dual reality, one lived privately and one projected endlessly across screens and magazines. While audiences associated her with effortless charm and luminous joy, the reality behind that image involved discipline, emotional labor, and constant adaptation. Her journey reflects not only success in entertainment, but also the psychological weight of being continuously observed. Over time, her story evolved into something more complex than stardom, a portrait of endurance under the quiet pressure of global admiration and expectation. Childhood shaped by change and emotional instability. Born in Smyrna, Georgia, Julia Roberts grew up in a household shaped by both artistic passion and financial instability. Her parents, once connected through theater and creative ambition, ran an acting school that symbolized idealism more than stability. However, behind that vision lay constant strain, frequent conflict, and eventual separation. When her parents divorced during her early childhood, Julia experienced a sense of emotional displacement that would quietly influence her later sensitivity as an actress. Her father's departure marked a turning point, creating an early understanding that comfort and security could dissolve unexpectedly. Her mother's remarriage introduced further change, bringing new dynamics into an already shifting household. Frequent moves, financial uncertainty, and emotional tension became part of her formative environment. Despite these challenges, she developed adaptability and emotional awareness early on. These qualities later became essential to her acting craft, allowing her to access emotional depth that felt lived rather than performed. Loss, voice, and the first connection to acting a defining emotional fracture in Julia Roberts' early life came with the death of her father when she was still a child. His absence left a lasting emotional imprint, not only because of the loss itself, but because of the tenderness and stability he had represented. Before his passing, he had recorded bedtime stories for her, creating an enduring connection through his voice that she would revisit repeatedly in moments of longing. At school, she struggled with shyness and a speech impediment, which made communication difficult and often isolating. Acting became an unexpected refuge, offering a space where expression felt possible without judgment. Through performance, she discovered a form of emotional release that bypassed her insecurities and allowed her to communicate freely. What began as a coping mechanism gradually transformed into a calling. It gave her structure, confidence, and a sense of identity during a time when her personal world felt uncertain and fragmented. In New York and the discipline of survival at 17, Julia Roberts moved to New York with ambition but little financial security, stepping into a world that demanded resilience far beyond artistic talent. The city was indifferent to her dreams, offering instead a daily reality shaped by rejection, cold streets, and economic struggle. Auditions were frequent, but opportunities were scarce, and each refusal reinforced the difficulty of entering an industry defined by competition and unpredictability. She lived modestly, often stretching limited resources and navigating long distances on foot to attend casting calls. Despite repeated setbacks, she maintained persistence, understanding that consistency mattered as much as talent. Early commercial work provided small breakthroughs, but nothing guaranteed stability. This period was less about success and more about endurance, where survival itself became a form of discipline. The experience shaped her understanding of effort, teaching her that recognition in entertainment often arrives only after sustained invisibility and repeated attempts to remain present in the face of rejection, a gesture of sacrifice and early turning points during her early struggle in New York. Julia Roberts faced moments where financial pressure collided with emotional attachment. One of the most symbolic experiences from this time involved parting with a cherished family possession, an item tied to her father's memory, in order to meet basic living expenses. The act was not simply financial, but deeply emotional, reflecting the difficult choices often required during survival. Such experiences reinforced the fragile balance between ambition and necessity in her early career. Despite hardship, she continued attending auditions and gradually began receiving minor roles that hinted at her potential. These early appearances revealed a natural screen presence that combined intensity with vulnerability. Casting directors began to notice her ability to convey emotional depth with minimal effort. Though success was not immediate, these small breakthroughs marked the beginning of recognition. They signaled that persistence was slowly transforming uncertainty into opportunity, even if the outcome remained far from guaranteed. Early recognition and the rise of a new screen presence, Julia Roberts' early film appearances in projects like Mystic Pizza and Steel Magnolias, introduced audiences to a performer capable of balancing emotional strength with vulnerability. In these roles, she displayed an instinctive understanding of character depth that felt both natural and compelling. Critics quickly noted her ability to command attention without exaggeration, marking her as a rising presence in Hollywood. Her performance in Steel Magnolias in particular earned widespread acclaim, culminating in award recognition that positioned her as one of the industry's most promising young talents. These successes did not erase her earlier struggles, but rather highlighted how those experiences had shaped her emotional range. Instead of performing emotion superficially, she drew from lived resilience. This period marked her transition from emerging actress to serious contender in Hollywood, setting the stage for a career that would soon expand far beyond critical recognition into global cultural influence. The cultural explosion of Pretty Woman, the release of Pretty Woman, became the defining turning point in Julia Roberts' career, transforming her from rising star into global icon. The film's success was immediate and overwhelming, resonating with audiences across generations and regions. Her portrayal of Vivian Ward combined charm, humor, and emotional sincerity, creating a character that felt both accessible and unforgettable. What began as a modest romantic comedy evolved into a cultural phenomenon that reshaped Hollywood's approach to the genre. With this success came unprecedented visibility, and Julia Roberts became synonymous with modern romance and optimism. However, this transformation also carried unintended consequences. Her image began to solidify into a public expectation that extended beyond her roles. She was no longer only performing characters, but also embodying a cultural ideal. This shift marked the beginning of a complex relationship between personal identity and public perception that would continue to evolve throughout her career. The weight of fame and emotional exhaustion as Julia Roberts' fame expanded, so did the emotional demands placed upon her by constant public attention. Her image as America's sweetheart created expectations that were difficult to maintain in real life, where personal struggles and fatigue existed beyond the camera. Interviews, media coverage, and public fascination often reduced her identity to a fixed symbol rather than a changing individual. Over time, this created emotional distance between her public persona and private self. The pressure to remain consistently radiant and composed began to feel limiting rather than celebratory. While her career continued to thrive, she quietly began reassessing what fulfillment meant beyond external validation. Fame brought opportunity, but it also reduced privacy and intensified scrutiny. This period marked a turning point where success alone was no longer enough to sustain emotional balance. She began seeking something more grounded: space, quiet, and relationships that existed outside the demands of public interpretation. Meeting Daniel Motter and the shift toward privacy during the filming of The Mexican, Julia Roberts met cinematographer Daniel Motter, a connection that would eventually redefine her personal life. Unlike many of her previous relationships shaped by public attention, this bond developed quietly and without spectacle. Motter's presence represented stability rather than intensity, offering a sense of normalcy that contrasted with the unpredictability of Hollywood. Their relationship progressed gradually, shaped by mutual respect and emotional steadiness rather than public performance. At the time, both faced complex personal circumstances, but their connection deepened through shared understanding rather than external validation. Over time, what began as professional proximity evolved into a lasting partnership grounded in privacy. This relationship marked a shift in Julia Roberts' life, moving her away from the constant visibility of fame toward a more intentional and protected personal world where emotional authenticity could exist without public interpretation. Marriage, parenthood, and a rebalanced life, Julia Roberts and Daniel Motter married in a private ceremony that reflected their shared desire for simplicity and separation from public spectacle. This decision symbolized a broader shift in her priorities, where personal fulfillment began to outweigh professional visibility. Together, they built a family life centered on privacy and emotional stability, raising 3 children away from the constant exposure of media attention. Parenthood reshaped her understanding of time, responsibility, and identity, shifting her focus from external achievement to internal presence. While she continued working in film, her choices became more selective, guided by balance rather than ambition alone. The rhythm of daily family life introduced a grounding influence that contrasted sharply with the intensity of her earlier career years. This phase of her life reflected not withdrawal from success, but a redefinition of it, one that valued emotional sustainability, privacy, and meaningful connection over constant public recognition. Family fractures, grief, and quiet reconciliation, despite personal stability, Julia Roberts' life continued to include moments of emotional difficulty shaped by family relationships and loss. The passing of her half-sister brought private grief that she chose not to publicly elaborate on, reflecting her preference for internal processing rather than public expression. At the same time, her relationship with her brother Eric Roberts experienced years of distance influenced by personal struggles, addiction, and career differences. Over time, however, gradual reconnection became possible through shared family experiences, particularly after she became a mother. These developments did not erase past tensions, but allowed for a softer understanding to emerge. This period in her life reflects the complexity of family bonds, where separation and reconnection often coexist. It also demonstrates her evolving approach to emotional challenges, choosing patience, restraint, and private healing over public explanation or resolution. Later career, purpose, and a life defined by choice. In her later career, Julia Roberts adopted a more selective and intentional approach to acting, choosing roles that offered depth rather than constant visibility. Her financial success provided independence, but her decisions increasingly reflected personal meaning rather than professional necessity. She also engaged in philanthropic work, supporting health, education, and humanitarian causes, often without public emphasis. Her lifestyle remained grounded, shaped by privacy, family, and long-term stability rather than display. Wealth, for her, became a tool for security rather than status, allowing her to maintain autonomy in both personal and professional decisions. Today, her life reflects a balance between legacy and restraint, where influence is measured less by frequency of appearance and more by intention. Her journey demonstrates that longevity in fame does not require constant visibility, but can instead be sustained through careful boundaries, emotional awareness, and the decision to prioritize life beyond public expectation. Conclusion: a life built beyond the camera's gaze, Julia Roberts' story ultimately extends beyond the boundaries of fame, tracing a path shaped by resilience, adaptation, and conscious self-definition. Her journey reflects how public success can coexist with private complexity and how identity can evolve even under continuous observation. From a childhood marked by instability to global recognition, and from emotional exposure to deliberate privacy, she has navigated each phase with increasing intentionality. What remains most striking is not only her cinematic legacy, but her ability to preserve a personal life that exists outside performance. Her story illustrates that fulfillment is not defined by visibility or applause, but by the capacity to choose one's own boundaries. In stepping back from constant public demand, she redefined what longevity in Hollywood can look like. Her life stands as a reminder that even within extraordinary fame, it is possible to build a quieter, steadier existence shaped by choice rather than expectation.